Ever wonder how Halloween, a holiday rooted in ancient European traditions, became such a big deal in a state known for sunshine, oranges, and, well, let's be honest, not a lot of autumn leaves? Like, Florida isn't exactly where you'd expect to find haunted hayrides and jack-o'-lanterns, right? Hey, folks, welcome back to Old Florida Now. I'm your host, Bo Carter, and today we're shifting gears from the palm trees and beaches of Florida to something a bit darker and definitely spookier. We're diving deep into Florida's unique history with Halloween, from its very first celebrations to the huge commercial events it's known for now.
Welcome to Old Florida Now, where we uncover the rich history and hidden stories of the Sunshine State. Each episode will explore the people, places, and events that shaped Florida's past. Let's dive in.
All right. So where does it all start? Let's rewind the clock all the way back to the early 1900s. Now, Halloween, as we know it, didn't really take off in the U.S. until around the mid-1800s, when Irish and Scottish immigrants brought their traditions with them. Things like carving turnips, which later became pumpkins, and telling ghost stories. But here in Florida, well, it took a bit longer. You got to remember, Florida was still a very rural, frontier-like place in the early 1900s. There were small towns scattered here and there, but it wasn't like the Northeast where you had these tightly packed communities. So in those early days, Halloween in Florida wasn't about spooky costumes or candy. Instead, it was more of a harvest festival thing. You'd see gatherings where folks would bob for apples, carve a few pumpkins, and tell stories. But there wasn't much focus on the supernatural just yet. A lot of these events were tied to the fall harvest, celebrating the end of the farming season, especially in more rural parts of the state like Ocala, Gainesville, and Tallahassee. Now, things start to shift around the 1920s and 30s. This is when Halloween starts becoming more of a kid's holiday. Trick-or-treating begins to take hold across the country, and Florida's no different. Kids would dress up in simple costumes, just nothing too elaborate back then, and go door to door in their neighborhoods. But what's interesting is that because Florida's weather was so different, there was this adjustment to the usual fall Halloween vibe. Instead of chilly autumn nights, you had kids trick-or-treating in 70-degree weather. So costumes had to be lighter, and you didn't get that crisp, cool feel that most people associate with Halloween. Now, here's where it starts to get really fun. After World War II, you see this boom in suburban growth. Florida, like much of the U.S., is exploding with new neighborhoods, and that means more places for kids to go trick or treating. The 1950s were really the golden era of trick or treating in Florida. You had neighborhoods organizing big Halloween parties, parades, and costume contests. And get this, there was even a rise in homemade costumes. Folks would get creative with whatever they had lying around. Bed sheets for ghosts, old clothes for scarecrows, that kind of thing. But we can't talk about Halloween in Florida without talking about the big guns, Disney World and Universal Studios. So let's jump to 1973 when Disney decided to get in on the Halloween action. They launched Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, and it was a game changer. Disney, being Disney, created this magical, family-friendly atmosphere where kids could dress up, trick or treat in the park, and enjoy all the themed entertainment. It wasn't scary. It was, well, magical, and that's kind of the vibe that still defines the event today. But Disney wasn't the only one in the game. By the early 1990s, Universal Studios saw an opportunity to take Halloween in a very different direction. In 1991, they launched Halloween Horror Nights. And let me tell you, it was a whole other beast. And Universal decided to lean into the horror side of Halloween, haunted houses, scare zones, and a whole bunch of actors dressed as your worst nightmares wandering around the park. They even created original characters like Jack the Clown, who has like a whole twisted backstory about being a murderous carnival performer. And each year, Halloween Horror Nights just got bigger and scarier. It's now one of the premier Halloween events in the entire country, and people fly in from all over to experience it. If you're into horror, this is the place to be. It's got everything. Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, you name it. But hey, not everyone's looking to be terrified out of their minds, right? For something a little more lighthearted, let's head south, way south to Key West. Down there, Halloween is, well, it's a party. Every year they host Fantasy Fest, which is basically Halloween on steroids. Think of it like a mashup of Mardi Gras and Halloween with parades, costume, very creative costumes, by the way, and just an all-around wild atmosphere. It's definitely more for the adults, but it shows how Halloween can be, whatever you want it to be. Now, for folks who want to stay on the spookier side but don't want to be surrounded by thousands of tourists, there are some really unique Halloween events across the state that often get overlooked. Take, for example, Screamageddon in Dade City. It's a more intimate, rural, haunted park with 6 different attractions. And get this, they're interactive. You can actually choose to be marked by the creatures, meaning they can touch you, pull you aside, and make you part of the show. Pretty intense, huh? And then there's a petrified forest over in Altamonte Springs, which combines nature with, nightmares. It's set in an actual forest, and they've got these 3 terrifying realms, water, land, and sky, that you have to navigate. Plus, they've got this cool outdoor element that makes it different from, say, the more controlled environments of theme parks. But let's not forget about Florida's oldest city, St. Augustine. This place is like haunted year round, but Halloween makes it even more eerie. They've got ghost tours, haunted forts, and even pirate legends. St. Augustine's got that old world charm, and the history there is perfect for a spooky night out. You ever taken a ghost tour in the old fort there? People swear they see spirits. So let's zoom out for a second and think about how Florida's history and geography really shaped how we celebrate Halloween. We're not talking cold, crisp autumn air and falling leaves. Instead, we've got palm trees, warm nights, and a whole lot of imagination. Floridians have managed to turn a holiday that's traditionally associated with fall into something that fits our unique vibe, whether it's trick-or-treating in your neighborhood, getting scared at a theme park, or partying in Key West. Florida's Halloween is, one of a kind. And you know what? That's the beauty of it. Halloween in Florida is as diverse as the state itself. You've got big budget events, you've got small town festivals, and you've got everything in between. It's a holiday that's evolved over the decades, but it's always kept one thing at its core: fun. Whether you're scaring or being scared, Florida knows how to celebrate. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to share some resources if you're curious and want to dive deeper into the history of Halloween, both in Florida and beyond. There's a lot more to this spooky holiday than just candy and costumes. First off, if you're interested in the historical roots of Halloween, I'd definitely check out the Library of Congress. They've got an awesome collection of historical newspaper articles that show how people were celebrating Halloween as far back as the early 1900s. It's pretty wild to see how much things have changed, and you can find tons of primary sources there, from photos of kids in costumes to articles about the spooky traditions that immigrants brought over from Europe. For those of you who are really into the global side of Halloween, take a look at some resources from the National Endowment for the Humanities. They've got a whole section that explores how Halloween in the U.S. compares to other festivals of the dead, like Dia de los Muertos in Mexico. It's a cool way to see the similarities and differences between these 2 major celebrations. And if you want to get a deeper look into the modern evolution of Halloween, how it became the commercial powerhouse it is today, history.com is a great place to start. They cover everything from the origins of trick or treating to the influence of movies and pop culture on the holiday. Lastly, if you're looking to experience some real Halloween fun here in Florida, there are plenty of events happening around the state, from family-friendly stuff at Legoland's Brick or Treat to more terrifying experiences like that petrified forest in Altamonte Springs. You're spoiled for choice. So if you want to keep this spooky spirit alive, definitely check those out in the show notes. All right, folks, I think that wraps it up for today's episode of Old Florida Now. I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into how Halloween has grown, evolved, and let's be real, thrived in the Sunshine State. Next time you're wandering through a corn maze, trick-or-treating, or maybe running for your life at Halloween Horror Nights, just remember you're part of a long, weird, and fascinating history. Thanks for hanging out with me. And as always, stay curious, stay spooky, and keep celebrating Old Florida. I'm Bo Carter, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Old Florida Now. Stay tuned for more stories from the Sunshine State's past. Until next time.